Another Premier League striker has been linked as a potential Alexander Isak replacement. In this video I'm going to explain why I don't think it would be a good idea to sign him. There's also football to discuss. Aston Villa away on Saturday. We'll be previewing the game and discussing who should be in the starting 11. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Please do subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the thumbs up button on the video as well. Join the community before the season starts. Only a couple of days to go. Big plans to come over the next few weeks for the channel this season. It's a huge season for it. After an incredible summer of growth that I didn't really expect, I'm really pleased with how it's gone. Thank you so much for your support. Today we're going to be looking at another striker link with Jean-Philippe Mateta, said to be on the list of potential Alexander Isak replacements. And also I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to reply to a comment from yesterday's video, which I really liked. I didn't respond directly because I wanted to discuss it on the video, because there's not really much else to talk about that I haven't already touched on this week. It's a great comment for debate, so I'm really looking forward to it. Hope the commenter doesn't take it as offence that I'm not calling him out. I really like the comment, and that's why I'm going to discuss it, even though I didn't necessarily agree with it. That's all to come. But first, Jean-Philippe Mateta, as I've said, linked yesterday as a potential Alexander Isak replacement, and I don't think that this is the way to go this summer. I think in terms of replacing Alexander Isak, Newcastle have an ever-shrinking pool of options, not only names-wise, but also the profile. What type of striker do they go and sign? And Mateta's name is an obvious one because he's Premier League proven goal scorer. He's scored double figures in the last couple of years, and he's impressed. He's a really good striker. He leads the line really well. He's powerful, and he's crucial to what Crystal Palace do. Set Eze's goal in the cup final last season in motion on the counter-attack against Manchester City. Linked really well there. Scored in the Community Shield as well. His pedigree is obvious, but for me, it's not just about getting a stopgap in. I've said so many times the best option for me is to keep Alexander Isak this season, even though he is causing all this disruption. And I do understand all of that, as I said yesterday, but you know, other than maybe Samu as a potential future star who could get somewhere close to his level, but that's, I think, less proven than it would be with Ekitike and with Sesko, or you know, more older strikers like Johan Wissa, who's mentioned as a Wilson replacement, but Ollie Watkins and now Mateta as a stopgap option. It just doesn't feel right. You've got Jorgen Strand Larsen in there as well. Basically, you're looking at sort of decent options to replace a world-class one. And I do understand the sort of Moneyball argument where you take the striker situation as a whole and you look at the stats and you look at the goals to replace between Wilson and Isak, and is it better to have two good strikers, two proven Premier League goal scorers, let's say for example Wissa and Strand Larsen, or Wissa and Mateta, or Mateta and Strand Larsen, any of those type of players, two of them to replace what is effectively, you know, all of Alexander Isak's goals plus sort of very little contribution from Callum Wilson? Or is it better to have Alexander Isak in that equation? And I think that's the answer to me. I think the reason why I'm sticking to this opinion is because I'm convinced that Alexander Isak will contribute next season if he's still at the club, and I don't see, as it's been said over the last week, by the day, how this deal gets done with Liverpool, because they're not coming towards the valuation. Newcastle are struggling to find a replacement of sufficient quality, and those two things have to happen for it to be even considered. Liverpool aren't, as I said, a serious option here. They've not come to the table with the right money. They're not taking it seriously. There's a really good quote from Charlie Eccleshare on the Totally Football Show on The Athletic, where he basically drew parallels and how exactly it is exactly the same. I think I've mentioned this before, to Harry Kane and Tottenham in 2021. 3 years in his contract, no route out. He'd really pushed to move away from Spurs, didn't turn up to training, said he was never going to play for them again, and then eventually had to reintegrate with a few boos from Spurs fans. It was all fine after that, and he ended up going a couple of years later to Bayern Munich. Obviously, fundamentally, it doesn't benefit Alexander Isak to follow through on his threat to not play for Newcastle again, because Newcastle have got good things to achieve, and he can achieve them with Newcastle this season by scoring goals. That'll be his focus in September, as I've always maintained. That's a better situation than going and getting somebody like Mateta, who, and you know, the idea that you would go and get Mateta, it's not simple, it's not easy. I mean, Crystal Palace have dug their heels in with Newcastle with Mark Gahey. They're dug in the heels with Mark Gahey even now with Liverpool, and it looks like he might have to stay for one more year because that valuation isn't being met. You've got Eze being linked with Arsenal and Tottenham. That hasn't happened either, even though he's got a release clause in his contract. So with those two sagas going on, are Crystal Palace going to be open to selling Jean-Philippe Mateta for anything like a good price this summer with 3 weeks to go in the window? Absolutely not. This is just a really terrible idea if they really were to pursue it. I don't foresee them pursuing it because of all these reasons: his age, the fact that actually, as well as he's done in the last 2 years, and I really am a big fan. 16 goals 2 seasons ago, 14 goals last season. He seems to have turned a corner at Palace, but before that, a little bit like Bryan Mbeumo, he didn't have great numbers to his name. He was getting single figures, the odd goal here and there for Palace before that. So he's turned a corner. Is he really the answer to picking up where Alexander Isak has left off? For me, absolutely not. And the underlying stats as well, there's nothing really that stands out in his scouting report. The highest percentile, he's got the 72nd percentile for progressive carries. Non-penalty goals is 62nd percentile, 53rd percentile for shot creating actions. Expected non-penalty goals and assists, 56th percentile. Shots total, 43rd percentile. He's not high on any of these underlying metrics, which some people may think are completely useless, but that's what clubs need to look at, I think, to understand when a player is going to come in and step up to a new level, whether they're coming from a different league or a lower club. The sorts of things you've got to really look at to see if they can pick up where somebody as world class as Alexander Isak is. And the new technical director from Atalanta spoken really about creating algorithms, as I mentioned in the lowdown that I did on him, about sort of understanding these risks of buying players who need to step up to a different level. Obviously Mateta is Premier League proven, but he's not Champions League proven, and that's the problem. That's what Newcastle need if they're going to replace Alexander Isak. Again, there is the argument to replace Alexander Isak across two players rather than one, in the sort of Moneyball way of looking at it. Yes, that's absolutely an option, but with 3 weeks left in the window, are you going to go and get somebody like Visser? I mean, they're struggling to get Johan Visser out of Brentford, let alone Strand Larsen out of Wolves, or in this example, Mateta out of Crystal Palace. This is a complete non-starter for me because he's not the right age, he's not the right profile, his underlying stats aren't good enough. And also, Newcastle need to, and this is where the nuance will come into the argument that I'm going to discuss today, off the back of the comment on yesterday's video. There's nuance involved in how they upgrade the squad, and this is where I'm going to get into. So the comment from John basically comes back on my positivity, effectively, for saying that it's been a good window if Newcastle are able to keep Isak, get Visser in with Jacob Ramsey, Aaron Ramsdale, Anthony Elanga and Malik Thiaw. That is a good window because the squad overall has been upgraded. If you look at the players who've gone out and the players who've come in, every one of those is an upgrade, and that's really important. John's argument was it hasn't been a good window because not many of those players are first team guarantees. He says arguing anything is just spin on a poor window. For me, I think that's not quite right because it's missing the point. And this is where the nuance comes in. Newcastle's ceiling is very high. If you look at the first 11 and you look at the spine of that team, even Kieran Trippier, but Lewis Hall, Tino Livramento, Tonali, Bruno, Isak up front, Gordon out wide. That is a Champions League spine of a team with other players making that team really good. And then you've got Elanga coming in, offering direct pace and creativity on that side. You've got Thiaw coming in with a good passing range, power and pace crucial as well. Recovery pace is crucial. And you've got Aaron Ramsdale coming in, who's better with the ball at his feet. I think that's why it's a positive window, because the profile of the squad has been improved. Those players have come in and solved problems. Yes, I understand that they're not first team guarantees, and Newcastle wanted first team guarantees. That was part of the reason why they had so many issues. But my problem last summer was that it was Gahey or nothing. They didn't have any plan B, and they really suffered for that at different times last season. This year they've reacted and gone and solved the problems in different ways, and I think that's positive. I also think that the spine of the team, as I said, is strong. The depth and the rest of the squad wasn't good enough, so if those players came out, Tonali wasn't there or Bruno wasn't there, the replacements weren't good enough, and I think the floor of the squad has been raised by these signings, especially when Jacob Ramsey, if he comes in, that midfield option off the back of Longstaff, who really didn't have anything to offer in the second half of last season. Jacob Ramsey certainly will, and also, crucially, given the Isak situation, he can play on the left while Anthony Gordon is playing through the middle as Isak's replacement at the moment. But the difference with Isak is because he's one of those star players, because he's one of those players who's pushed the ceiling. If you're going to replace him, it has to be someone who can at least has the potential to reach those levels. That's the sort of nuance here. That may sound like a contradiction, but it isn't. Those players are the reason why Newcastle don't have to go and find players of that level all the time, because they're still here. Keeping them is why I think it's not as important to bring some of the others in. And in an ideal world, yes, absolutely, that's why they were looking for João Pedro, for Dean Huijsen, for Michael Elise last year. In an ideal world, they'd absolutely go and get the very best players. But Newcastle have had a really harsh lesson this summer in terms of what they can do with the transfer window, and I'm really pleased with the way they've reacted in still finding different ways to solve the profile issues in the squad. The fact that there was no ball-playing goalkeeper, the fact that there was no pace at the back, those sorts of things have been fixed by players that can improve the first team 11, but also definitely improve the squad. And I think when you look at, the fact that Newcastle played Aston Villa last season, they play Aston Villa on Saturday, the reason that they got absolutely battered in that game was because off the bench Villa had a lot more quality than Newcastle did. That was one of the main reasons. And Villa's squad doesn't have the quality level of people like Tonali or Bruno or Isak, but the difference between their best players and worst players of their 18-20 man squad is much different to what Newcastle's was last season. I think that's why I think in disagreement to John's excellent point, and you really can't argue with his logic. And I think, as I say, Newcastle did try and go for the very best players, but the reality is that last season they failed to get one of those best players and didn't find anybody else, and then some of those issues in the squad became glaring, and it was a problem. This season it feels like that won't be as much of an issue because and with the Champions League, these players have either played in the Champions League or proven themselves in the Premier League and are probably ready to step up to the Champions League. I think they deserve a chance. So I think the squad is overall better, but the difference between bringing in Thiaw or Ramsdale or Elanga to maybe raise the floor with Isak is, if you do that, then the squad is weaker. The squad and the team is weaker if you don't replace Isak with somebody of a similar sort of profile or level in the future, because it's impossible to replace him of the same level now. That's why he's world class. That's why he wants to leave. But replacing someone with a stopgap like Mateta or having Johan Visser be your main striker, or even Ollie Watkins to an extent, I think would speak to John's point more than what I was talking about yesterday. But again, let me know in the comment section if you agree. Hopefully John will come back to that. I'd really like to know what you guys think on that. But that's the reason why I think there's a little bit difference in the nuance as well. And just quickly, we will talk about Saturday's game at Aston Villa and the starting 11. There's obviously one big thing that will happen. That's Anthony Gordon playing down the middle. Does Harvey Barnes play on the left? Does Anthony Elanga start on the right? Does Jacob Murphy start on the right? And I think the other big question is, does Malik Thiaw start at the back? And in my opinion, it'll be Barnes up front with Gordon and Elanga, but Schär and Byrne at the back as well. I don't even think Sven Botman will start. You'll see on the screen with my predicted 11. The way Eddie Howe works, it takes time for players to bed in. And I think by the end of the season, Thiaw will be first choice, but at the moment, no. The argument for starting him is the pace of Ollie Watkins and the fact that Villa got in behind Newcastle a lot last season because of the pace of Byrne and Schär, and will that be a problem? And I think that is an absolutely fair argument, but I just don't see Eddie Howe making any other choice. Even Botman coming off in the Seller Cup last weekend at half time, having such a difficult pre-season, but getting that little injury, getting that groin problem off the back of all of his knee issues as well. He hasn't proved his fitness enough to start, and I think it will be that pairing at the back, and that does concern me against the pace of Watkins and the ability in transition generally of Aston Villa when they turn the ball over in midfield. That was a huge reason again why they won the game back in April. But I have trust in Tonali, Bruno and Joelinton to win the midfield battle and give Newcastle a foothold, and hopefully that'll be a little bit different. In terms of the feeling going into the game as well, Villa have had a difficult summer like Newcastle. As I've said, for me, Newcastle's summer has turned round in the last few days. They won't have Jacob Ramsey likely playing because he will either be on the verge, if not already signed by Newcastle. I've gone for Pope in goal over Ramsdale, even though there's been mistakes in pre-season, again for similar reasons to Thiaw at the back. I think even now Eddie Howe trusts Nick Pope, and you'll see maybe a progression over the season of Ramsdale coming in. I would be surprised if Pope didn't start in goal, but that isn't guaranteed, of course. Elanga's the one I think will start. He's had a full pre-season, he's played in all the big games, and what he will bring in terms of his direct running and the way he scares defences, his raw pace, will help Newcastle a lot in this game. Gordon up front, Newcastle's record is poor when he starts down the middle, but there's no real other option at the moment, and obviously that leaves Harvey Barnes on the left. What will the score be? I think it'll be a draw. I think that would be a good result for Newcastle. But obviously it can go either way. These games tend to go in the favour of the home team because they start fast. I think if Newcastle can stem that tide in the first 5-10 minutes, obviously going down 1-0 in the first minute at Villa Park in April didn't help. So if they can get through the first 10-20 minutes, it will be a positive result, I think. Such a difficult game to go into without a top striker. So we'll see how it goes. But I don't think Thiaw will start. Let me know in the comments. Would you start him? Do you think he should start? We'll talk more about this game maybe tomorrow after Eddie Howe's press conference. There's lots more transfer stuff coming before the end of the window as well over the next couple of weeks. Thanks so much for joining me. Like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers.